Hi, I'm Richard Reeves. I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where I run the Future of the Middle Class initiative. Whenever I tell people that that's what I'm doing, I usually get two questions. One, why are you doing it with that accent? So then I have to justify the fact that although British by background, I'm now a proud US citizen and very concerned about the plight of the American middle class. And the other question I get is, does the middle class have a future? And that indeed is the question that we're addressing. My answer to that is that it will depend. It will depend on policymakers, depend on the decisions that we all make. And the future of the middle class will lie to a very large extent in the hands of our cities and city policymakers and in colleges. And so I've just written a paper with my colleague Catherine Guillot on precisely that question of making the middle class and the role of colleges and the role of cities. And we focus particularly on the Mountain West. This paper is part of a new initiative, a new collaboration between Brookings Mountain West, based at UNLV, and the Future of the Middle Class initiative based on the Brookings main campus in DC. Please do check out the website and our events and papers. What I'm going to do is give a very brief potted economic history of Las Vegas in the last decade or so. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we define the middle class, and then I'm going to analyze the role of colleges in both serving and lifting up the middle class. The income distribution in Las Vegas in '99, before the recession, looked like this. Median household income for a family of three was around $73,000. But then Vegas was hit very hard by the recession. The household income for a family of three dropped to about $60,000, and the whole distribution shifted to the left. And so many more households counted as low income in 2011 than had done in '99. Since then, the distribution shifted back somewhat, but we haven't seen full recovery, and median income now is around $65,000. So hit pretty hard by the recession in Las Vegas and still recovering, still bouncing back. And that's important context for looking at the role of colleges, which I'll turn to in a moment, because the labor market that students are graduating into really does matter. And the data I'm going to present measures the incomes of students in 2014, so in this kind of very difficult period for a number of cities, but for Las Vegas in particular. The way you think about the middle class partly depends on how you define the middle class, and there are many definitions around. In fact, the kind of joke is that if you ask 12 economists to define the middle class, you'll get at least 13 different answers. There are two main definitions in use at the moment. The Pew definition from the Pew Trust, and that is based on the median. It's between 2/3 of the median and 200% of the median. And then our own definition at Brookings, which is the middle 60% of the distribution. So a somewhat different definition. And what you can see is that it means that particularly in certain cities, you'll get slightly different answers to the size of the middle class. Our own definition stretches a little bit lower in the distribution than the Pew one does. And under our definition, the middle class didn't shrink very much during the recession in Las Vegas. This kind of shifted downwards along with the general economic downturn. But when you read a headline, the middle class is shrinking or growing or hollowing out, then always ask yourself the question of how it's being defined. The real question is not how big is the middle class. That's really just a measure of income distribution. It's more, how is the middle class doing? How is the middle class faring, both in terms of income, wages, employment, etc.? That's really the critical question. I've already said that Las Vegas was hit hard in the recession. In fact, was in the 10 cities hit hardest of all during the Great Recession. And we know that during the recession, it was middle wage earners that were hit hardest. But now, thanks to work from Brad Hirschbein at the Upjohn Institute, we can actually be more specific about that, and we draw on his analysis here to look at what has happened to wages at different wage quintiles, different points of the distribution. And what Brad's work shows is that you can see that wage growth here, measured between 2006 and 2016, was lower for those middle three income quintiles or wage quintiles, but lowest of all in the places that were hardest hit. In fact, that's where you can see the biggest difference in wage growth between cities that were hit hardest and those who were hit less hard, is in that middle distribution. And you can see in yellow Las Vegas, that was one of the hardest hit, that's certainly true here in the Las Vegas metro area. And so for the second wage quintile and the third wage quintile, seeing wage growth of 2%, 3%, and that's over a 10-year period. So that's very low wage growth indeed for working class and middle class Las Vegas residents. And so that's important because, again, that means the labour market is still recovering, and that's the labour market into which many students from Las Vegas or from Nevada institutions will be turning. I now want to turn to the role of colleges in serving middle-class students. And here I'm going to use our definition of the middle 60% of the distribution. And here we're just going to put up 3 colleges. And you can see the percentage of students that they take from households of different incomes, varies quite considerably. So here you can see University of Nevada, Reno, UNLV, and the College of Southern Nevada. And as you might expect, the College of Southern Nevada takes more students from the bottom and a lot of students from the middle too. But if we focus in on this middle 60, what you can see is that the College of Southern Nevada takes 68% of its students from that middle 60, UNLV 57%, and University of Nevada, Reno somewhat less at 51%. UNR also takes more students from the top 20% than either UNLV or the College of Southern Nevada. So we're interested in the extent to which colleges serve that middle 60%. Very often ignored in college debates. Debates about higher education tend to focus on the very bottom, the poorest, or the elite colleges who predominantly serve those from the top, or how far colleges move people from the very bottom to the very top. And here we wanted to do something slightly different. We wanted to focus really on the extent to which colleges are serving and lifting up the middle class. And so we judge a college by how many of its students come from middle class backgrounds, but without taking into account how many they take from poor backgrounds. So we don't want to penalize those institutions working hard to take lots of low income kids just because they're also taking lots of middle class kids. So our measure of access is, in effect, of those from the top 80%, how many of your students are from the middle 60? So are you a middle class institution serving, as opposed to the upper middle class who are the top 20%? So that becomes our measure of access, those really middle 60. And then we've used a slightly different measure of success too. So on this chart, I apologize for the chart. I call it it's a lots of dots chart. It's like someone's spilt their morning oatmeal or something. But each dot represents a college in the US. So it's a lot of data in here. On our definition, so on our definition of access, which is the horizontal axis, you can see what percentage of your students are from that middle 60, taking out the bottom 20. And on the vertical axis, we've constructed a slightly different mobility measure from the traditional ones of bottom to top. And here what we've done is we've simply averaged out the movement up and down the income rungs of students who are enrolled in those colleges, or who were enrolled in those colleges when we measure their incomes at around the age of 34. Here we're drawing on data from Raj Chetty's Opportunity Insights. And what you can see is that there's a lot of clustering around 0, but bear in mind that relative mobility means people are moving up and down. Also bear in mind that for many people, staying in place would be a real achievement. Downward mobility is very painful for people, and so simply maintaining a middle class standard of living may well count as an achievement for many students. But by putting it together as an average, what we're doing is we're saying moving up 1 quintile is good, moving up 2 is twice as good, moving up 3 even better. But it's also good to remain in place, and that downward mobility is not something you'd probably hope for from those who attend college. And you'll see from the very bottom right hand corner there's a dot there for those who don't enroll in college, and you do see strong rates of downward mobility, relatively speaking, for that group, as you'd expect. But as there are so many dots here, let's kind of zoom in and look at some Mountain West colleges in particular, just to kind of illustrate the story. And what you can see there is that many of the Mountain West colleges are above the line, and in fact 0.2 is the average nationally, and so many of them are above the national average in terms of moving people up the economic ladder on our measure. There's a cluster of 4 institutions in that sort of top left where you can see both of the University of Nevada colleges as well as the Arizona colleges here lumped together. And Colorado State. And so you're seeing that these are institutions with above average performance in terms of how many quintiles are people moving up. And then as you're kind of moving left to right, what's telling me the colleges over to the right are the ones who are taking more students from the middle class. And you'll see some of the kind of open access colleges taking many more from those middle class households. Even if they're not necessarily moving them up, at least holding them in place might be seen as an achievement. Also, just if you're really eagle-eyed, you'll see perhaps some surprising negative numbers there, and Utah State in particular stood out. So we dug into that, and we think what's happening there is because incomes are being measured by at an individual level in their people's mid-30s, what we're picking up there is people who aren't actually working, but they're married to someone who is. Utah State graduates have very high rates of marriage. More than 4/5 of those who attended Utah State are married in their mid-30s, and many of those are reporting that they are not individually earning, but they're married to someone who does. And so what's probably happening there is an artifact of higher marriage rates and some homemakers. And so it's just a warning. How do we interpret this data? Always be careful not to mix up household income, individual income, etc. But the overall picture is that we're seeing that it's better to go to college than not to do so. There's variation among colleges and how far they move people up, that holding people in place may well be an achievement. And just more generally, we need a broader measure of how we think about serving middle class students and helping people to move up or maintain their position on the ladder above and beyond just the sort of headline grabbing Horatio Alger stories. Making a middle class is a national priority. It's a vitally important task for policymakers at every level, but it's perhaps particularly important for those who are working at a city level with local labour markets, workforce development, and colleges. We do know that skills and wages are really where the action are. And as we go forward, we're hoping to explore these issues in much more detail, including other issues such as housing, K-12 educations, and so on. So stay tuned, do check out the website, and thanks for listening.